Hey, it's Sol with another video. Today I want to talk about that which has not been revealed in the upcoming Dragonflight expansion, and that is max level world content. By the end, we still won't know exactly what we'll be doing, but I hope that we can come away with some ideas and expectations and takeaways for future conversations and feedback and discourse. If you don't mind helping out the channel, hit that like button please, and subscribe for more content. So, why even talk about world content? Let's roll a clip.
Is there any other content that like just a casual player who just logs on and just wants to enjoy the game at large is going to really have to do on a daily?
Well, I mean, have to do in the mandatory sense? Or
No, like actually
exactly, yeah.
A little bit of both, but you know, just like casual fun stuff too, like the Darkmoon Fair, for example. Are we going to get something similar to that? I
mean, so I think maybe not Darkmoon Fair specifically,
yeah.
But I think I think everything, events, world content in general. You know, I think Zereth Mortis is like it's one zone. We're looking to, in a lot of ways, build, you know, an entire continent, an entire expansion with those philosophies and that approach. And so things like protoform synthesis that currently exist just as, you know, a fun collection space to explore is the kind of thing we want to do more of. I think we've in a lot of ways underserved something that may be almost a silent majority in our game, or a quiet majority, which are people who aren't looking to, you know, top meters and push keys and get their PvP rating up. They just want to explore, do chill stuff, and feel at home in the world. And while still serving, you know, the core raid, dungeon, all the rest, we want to do more for that group in particular in Dragonflight.
Throughout Shadowlands at least, Blizzard's gone a long way towards trying to serve up world content better. At least to their credit. We got a massive delivery of collectibles and a deep, long-term feature with the Covenant Sanctums. In just my opinion, I think our feelings on that sort of feature would have been received better if instead of Covenants, we got something more familiar, more close to home, like, say, I don't know, different Dragonflights, a Light faction, a Void faction, a Horde or Alliance faction, you know, groups that we might already care about. Korthia was a nice try, but I mostly stopped visiting there as soon as I could. That's my way of saying I didn't like it. It just didn't work for me. Meanwhile, Zereth Mortis made up for it in a lot of ways with, again, long-tail farming, with protoform synthesis, with lots of transmog and collectibles, with gear that can be purchased and upgraded, and finally topping it off with a place with which to obtain tier sets. If Zereth Mortis is an early version of what to maybe expect from Dragonflight, I'm already pretty excited to learn more. I mean, I hope we get a lot more than that, but you know what I mean. Among the many interviews conducted recently, I'm also going to refer to this Forbes interview from just last week. In response to questions on artifact power like systems, Brian Halunka said that, quote, "We have some really exciting things going on with world content, and that'll be a bit of a focus, so that will still be there. We have a lot of players who enjoy questing in the outdoor world, and that is their main way they interact with World of Warcraft. So we want to make sure we support them and provide a lot of content that they're excited to play." Steve Denuser follows up, saying there are big differences here between, say, the Covenants and Shadowlands. Here, you're free to dip in and out of the different factions as you see fit. So if you want today to work on your Dragon Scale Expedition, which is the combination of the Explorers League and the Reliquary, you can do that. Or you can shift over to one of the other factions and level that up, and you'll be able to see the rewards. It's almost like each of them has their own kind of renown path to them. And you can dip in and out of those as you see fit. Nothing is forcing you into one path or another. Quick thought, I wonder if we can just freely slide between one faction and another throughout a day or a single play session, or will it feel kind of like Mists of Pandaria, where we had to choose a faction and then we can only work on like those one or two per day? Anyway, in a different interview Hazel conducted with Ian Hazacostas, the game director explained a little bit more in this clip.
So imagine instead of, you know, your Venthyr renown or your Night Fae renown, it's this Centaur clan or the Explorers League that you're building renown with and working towards unlocking goals along the way. Not necessarily through the same, like, you know, structured weekly quest where you have to do the same quest every week like you did for your Covenant, but more just open-ended objectives. In terms of the things that would be available through these tracks, you know, I think nothing that we've currently planned is that sort of like auxiliary multiplicative player power that lies outside of our other systems. Of course there can be cosmetics, of course there's gear there, right? The same way, you know, if you're an outdoor world-oriented player who doesn't do Mythic Plus, who isn't doing progressive rating, you know, all those players still want and deserve and need item progression of their own. And I think this is a more streamlined, elegant way to have those goals that you can work towards on your own pace as you choose to help this group or that group when you log in every day.
From this, on top of dragon riding as a literal vehicle to different activities, we can start painting a picture of what max level content will be like out in the world. In my vision, around the time we reach the new max level of 70, we'll have access to 4 factions with an advanced reputation system. We can call it Renown 2.0 or Mega Factions, whatever you want. There should be little to no time gating in this situation, and most of the unlocks from these reputations outside of gear will be account-wide. And it sounds kind of vague, so I'll try to visualize. Imagine if Renown right now was account-wide, and Renown levels unlocked access to vendors and a tabard, maybe a perk that makes you glow all funny, and you get an upgrade to your dragon riding, and at some point a piece of gear. The expectation is that when you switch to an alt, that alt will have access to everything that your main was able to access, except for maybe that piece of gear. Or maybe you can at least get access to it, but you still need to spend the gold or whatever it is to buy it. How this new reputation is gained seemed a little bit vague though. Ian said that it's not necessarily through the same structured weekly quest, where you have to do the same quest every week for your covenant, but more open-ended objectives. Right. But technically, the weekly quests of Shaping Fate in Korthia and Patterns Within Patterns in Zereth Mortis, it was the same quest every week, but we had quite a bit of freedom to complete world quests, or dailies, or smashing rares and grabbing treasures. So it could mean something as simple as lifting the weekly quest structure, thereby lifting the gates that would prevent us from no-lifing these new reputations day one. But if gear will be part of these reward tracks, to what end, right? Is this gear basically going to be endgame for world content players? Like, does the buck stop there? Or maybe should we expect an equivalent to ciphers of the first ones as a sort of upgrade system? And it could be. But I see an opportunity for the WoW team to go in a pretty different and wild direction that could be really satisfying. Thanks to dragon riding, players will have a method of travel to move greater distances faster with some vertical movement. This lets the team create an experience that offers both convenience and this sort of analog way of learning the lay of the land. I predict that very quickly we as players we're going to learn of, regular launch points with which we can traverse the greatest distance. We'll be looking at where we're going more often, sometimes noticing a thing that could be out of the ordinary. In other words, dragon riding will make it a habit. It'll be like second nature to be more observant as we're climbing and descending. Leveling up our dragon riding skill will let us access areas that were once impossible to reach, meaning new places to explore, new enemies to fight, new loot to find. That is where I think professions and work orders come in.
Here, really, it's more about choice. It's more about specialization, and I think that's how we're hoping to achieve differentiation. Because I think part of identity is being able to do things as a blacksmith that not every blacksmith can do. If all blacksmiths are identical, then it's like, well, just find a generic blacksmith, hand them your stuff, they'll click combine. Specializations are an interesting path there, something that we didn't really get into much today, but we'll be talking about a lot in the weeks to come, is that each of these professions actually also has a talent tree, a specialization to it, so that rather than just picking, let's say, armor smithing or weaponsmithing, you can invest in armor smithing and then further in making plate armor and further in making helms, and have bonuses to your ability to make higher level ones at a higher level of quality that are at least initially exclusive with making the choice to invest in making mail gloves or in making two-handed swords.
Throughout these interviews, when work orders were mentioned, the team brought up the idea of a player who has soul-bound materials that they can set up a work order using said materials. The crafter who answers the work order will then use the client's materials to complete that work order. They take a fee for the materials and they take a tip, and then, everyone walks away happy. This, if I'm right, and I'm really hoping I'm right, opens up huge potential for gameplay. Let's say that when your dragon riding reaches some certain level, you can now access that floating island somewhere over there. On that island could be a rare or a world quest, but the point is accessing that island will now let you farm up some single piece of material that will spawn there once every few days, giving you ample flexibility to return to this island, I don't know, twice a week or so to get this material. And then you can throw this material, once you have enough, throw all that into a work order for epic gear that a crafter can complete for you. But let's reimagine this just a little bit, okay? Let's say reputation happened to be the gate that let you onto this island, which you could only get to via teleporter. Like, forget the dragon riding for a second, but you know, it's kind of the same difference. But in both cases, whether it's reputation access or flying to this island, that privilege is going to be shared account-wide, meaning alts can almost immediately start working towards obtaining this material and soon after this epic gear. I'm speaking mostly in terms of gear progression here, I know, but this seems pretty amazing. It's already been said that crafting professions could potentially make mythic level gear, but there was little indication of where to get the materials to obtain said gear. And there's no doubt that there will be some restrictions on how accessible a full mythic set would be without stepping foot into mythic level content, but let's set that aside for now. I can definitely see a combination of materials, both tradable and soulbound, factoring in. From a crafter's point of view, they can decide to use their own earned soulbound materials to complete a craft for themselves to use or to sell, or they can use it for others to complete their work orders. Obtaining these materials is where the WoW team has to be very careful about, though, in my opinion. With knowledge of how this works, a progression-minded player would feel forced to grind out whatever requirement there is to obtain this material, and then feel forced to log on as frequently as they need to until the desired result is reached. There's a threshold, okay? There's a threshold where an opportunity to obtain player power becomes a requirement. But there's also, in my opinion, a threshold of tolerance, a need to prevent toe-stepping between player demographics, and we gotta give more context too. Let's use Mythic Plus as the measuring stick. So in theory, in the first couple of weeks in Dragonflight Season 1, a group of players could complete a plus 15 Keystone dungeon and get a max item level weapon in the Dragonflight Great Vault, or whatever it's going to be called. That's a very possible outcome, meaning that a player could get a super powerful weapon starting on like the 4th or 5th week of an expansion. Now let's look at Dragonflight professions. I'm just kidding, we can't see a damn thing outside of screenshots or whatever, but what we do know about professions is that there will be specializations for gear. There's also going to be profession-specific gear with which you would probably need in order to make these high-level crafts. There will be specialization points and a sort of tree that will let you focus on certain things you want to craft at a better quality. Going forward, I'm very much speculating, okay? So beware. I have a feeling that Dragonflight blacksmithing, in this example, is going to resemble legendary crafting in Shadowlands, as in, we have a bunch of recipes that we can rank up. Only instead of pouring tons and tons of resources into it, which I thought was economically devastating for this expansion, we're going back to specialization points, kind of like those tokens from Wrath of the Lich King. That's going to mean crafters will be making choices on where to spend their points. Like, do they want to spread themselves out so they can craft a little bit of everything? Or do they want to go all in with, say, a weapon? Whatever the case, I can easily see the WoW team designing crafting specializations in such a way that it'll take a while for a crafter to get the recipe rank for making that mythic weapon, to obtain the crafting gear needed to make it, and for other players to obtain their own materials to make that mythic weapon. If a top shelf Keystone Master can start obtaining mythic gear just a couple weeks into a season, how long should it take for a crafter to make a mythic anything for a single player? And there's an answer in there that sounds fair and reasonable. I don't know what it is, but there's an answer. I know this topic was meant to focus more on world content, but a recent developer post helped to back up some of my predictions earlier in this video, as well as give context on how professions are going to affect raiders, PvPers, and dungeon folk, as well as world content players. In this thread, they confirmed that professions will have soulbound materials earned from running all sorts of content. Said resources would be used to craft epic gear, presumably from work orders. The more content you do, which includes both instanced and world content, the more materials you will obtain to get you access to get higher gear. This strongly implies that if you are a mostly solo player, there is a path to top-end gear. It's just going to be longer given the limited amount of content run. For endgame players, these soulbound reagents serve as a kind of bad luck reagent to be used not to buy the gear that you want, but to have it crafted. In a way, if this was Valor, crafters in Dragonflight are now going to be the Valor vendors. Looking back at Zereth Mortis, I do think that it's pretty cool that players got access to the equivalent of normal raid gear without even having stepped foot into group content. And as a plus, in patch 9.2.5, weapons and trinkets will be added into the mix, giving players a consistent item level. I'd like to see that sort of progression in Dragonflight 2, where zone content will take players to a certain, an item level plateau, and then participating in either higher content or the player economy, that's going to be what takes them to that next level. The account-wide systems make accessing these perks feel like you've earned them, with the convenience that it won't be a pain in the ass to earn those perks again and again and again. There were a few vague mentions in these interviews and comments that's worth bringing up, because power is power, right? But transmog lasts forever. So how about dragon races? Dragon riding is meant to feel like an epic experience, but it doesn't mean much if you can't put your skills to the test. There could be tons of rewards there, from transmog for yourself to transmog and customization for your dragons. It's been also mentioned that the Anaran Plains would feature centaurs and beasts that they'd be hunting. Maybe you can do that too. So you know what would be cool? A series of encounters where you and some centaurs and some Nezingwari people, some team, they track the biggest game in the zone, resulting in this fun and maybe a difficult solo encounter, a kind of monster hunter experience where enemies have multiple health bars and different body parts, and you have to hit all the right spots. And let's not forget the different outdoor tech that was made available in the past that can be used to sort of spice things up. Like, think Legion and Battle for Azeroth Assault, but, something more subtle like a weather event. Heavy rains suddenly come down, causing, otherwise neutral monsters to go berserk. Or in another zone, there could be, a snowstorm in a certain area, and all of a sudden your vision is hindered. And in the usual Assault fashion, there can be different quests and events and world quests or whatever that occur during this time. The difference, I guess, is that instead of making it into like this progression-related, required thing with achievements or whatever, it's just a natural thing that happens on the regular. The team mentioned how well received the protoform synthesis feature was. Now imagine the scope of that being spread across an entire continent. Where are you going to have to travel to get the materials that you need for that pet or mount or piece of gear? Like, who are you going to have to fight? And perhaps NPC crafting doesn't have to be limited to pets and mounts. What about transmog? Because setting aside individual class sets and color tints, Shadowlands has to be credited like they gave a single character over a dozen unique sets that they can collect, 5 of which are shared. It's still far fewer than Legion with the multiple individual class sets, but for a single character, as I mentioned, I'll at least give credit where it's due. Despite a lack of Torghast or islands or covenants, there is a lot of potential for the team to curate all sorts of experiences for players to work towards. These few examples are like the easy ones. Each faction, which we don't even know all 4 of them yet, each of them could have its own special activity. Archaeology is being set aside once again, but that doesn't mean we can't get some sort of activity with the Dragon Scale Expedition. Again, they mentioned that's the Horde and Alliance team sent to explore the islands. There could be an activity related to them, which gets crazier and cooler as the reputation level goes up. There might be some really awesome things to do. The only caveat is that we're all outside. At first I was worried about the Void being left with a lack of player progression despite the many complaints about it. Now though, I think I'm becoming more and more confident that Dragonflight is quite capable of delivering a very meaty expansion in the outdoor world. Whether the WoW team pulls it off or not, well, that's up to them. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Faith? No faith? Feel free to leave a comment below. Like the video, subscribe for more content, and I will catch you later. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.